Well, what a week this has been. After all the news of this week, I was happy to hear that today is National Pina Colada Day. I was ready for that. I could celebrate that. Oh, and you know, our theme this month is loving kindness and forgiveness. And it's interesting that when we declare an intention like that, I'm going to be a presence of loving kindness and forgiveness, guess what? We get opportunities to show that we mean what we say. That we mean what we say. The book that we're reading this month is The Art of Forgiveness, Loving Kindness and Peace by Jack Kornfield. Jack Kornfield says, "In this world there are two great sources of strength. One rests with those who are not afraid to kill. The other rests with those who are not afraid to love." And he also quotes Dorothy Day, the Catholic activist, who said, "If our cause is a mighty one, and surely peace on earth in these days is the great issue, if we are opposing the powers of destruction, of annihilation, and working on the side of life, then surely we must use our greatest weapon, the forces of love that are in each one of us." The forces of love that are in each one of us. Has anyone here ever been involved in a situation, a demonstration, or some kind of event that was covered by the media? And did you find that the media coverage was accurate and comprehensive? And didn't have a particular point of view? That is what I know that we're all perceiving, is that whatever media outlet you're watching, it's telling a different story about the events that have occurred, because there's a different perception and a different point of view. And all of us have these filters of perception and point of view. We all have them. They come from our experience, they come from our families, our culture, our nation, our life brings us all of these things. And so when we have a new experience, we sort of bounce it off the old one. And this can get us in a lot of trouble, which is why spiritual teachers tell us to be mindful, to be present in the now, to accept what is happening for what is happening now, and not filter it through all of this other garbage and trash that we have picked up along the way. Yet we all get stuck in this mode. So we need to go back to our tools. We need to go back to what is it that we need to remember about the truth that will help us in times like these. This is when it's important for us to have a practice, a daily practice, that allows us to be, as we call it, prayed up. Prayed up for when the situation strikes that catches us unawares, that makes us dive into the media frenzy and get all caught up in it. Or can we step back from it? Can we step back from it, not letting go of compassion, not letting go of our feelings? We get to experience whatever our feelings are, our feelings, of sadness, or our feelings of compassion, our feelings even of fear. And to just recognize that that's what I'm feeling. I'm feeling fear, I'm feeling sadness, I'm feeling compassion. And now, what shall I do with these feelings? Who am I? Who am I in this moment? dealing with all of this. It was interesting. I got the news about Dallas after I had just come out of the movie, The Free State of Jones. And The Free State of Jones is all about the Civil War and a bunch of runaway slaves and poor white people who get together to fight the Confederacy because they're stealing all their food and they don't want to fight what they call the rich man's war. And so when they were together against a common enemy, they were all united. They were all helping each other. But as soon as the war ended, as soon as they no longer had a common enemy, then the divisions started coming back again. And I thought, as soon as I heard about Dallas, I thought the repercussions of that, the repercussions of what happened then, are still reverberating in us now. But all of that is in the past. And the question is, how are we going to create our future? We are at choice. In this moment of now is always the moment of choice, where we get to choose life or death. We get to choose creative inspiration, or we get to choose destruction. Our choice. Our choice. And so what tools do we have to help us to do that? And one of the things that really relates to today's talk, which is our biggest victim, you. Your biggest victim is you. Well, I was in a conversation with Ike Moore this week, and he said, I think we all need to practice the 4 agreements. If we all practice the 4 agreements, life would really be good. And I said, you are absolutely right. We need to remember that. So I went back and I pulled out my copy and I read it again. And that is such a wise, wise book. It talks about how we came into this world. I mean, I want you to think of a baby picture. Your baby picture, your children's baby picture, your grandchildren's baby picture. And you look at that baby, innocent, vulnerable, curious, open to life. And how did we get to the point where we have people killing each other? All we know for sure is that 7 more people died of gun violence this week. Everything else is a story that someone's making up about the who, the why, the where, the blah, 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 blah. We love stories. We want to know. But one of the tools we have is to switch from judgment to wonder. To switch from judgment to wonder. I wonder what really happened. I wonder what the police officer had going on in his life and what he was thinking and how fearful he was. What happened to him in his life that he was so fearful that he would have his gun out for a taillight burned out? You know, you wonder. We turn to wonder instead of judgment. And so in this 4 agreements, the first agreement is be impeccable with your word. Be impeccable with your word. Now, impeccable is an interesting word. He says that it comes from the wonderful Latin language, of course. Im means without, and pectus in the Latin means sin. And he says sin is, let's see here, I'm just wandering around my thing because I'm not following my original thing. he says, okay, the prefix "im" means without, the Latin peccatus means sin, and he defines sin as anything you do which goes against yourself. A sin is anything you do which goes against yourself, and when he says self, he's meaning that true self, which is the presence of love. That true self is the presence of love, is the presence of creativity, is the presence of that gift each of us came here to give. That is our true self. And whenever we do something against that true self, we call it a sin. But a sin is nothing but a mistake. We make a mistake, and he says we're the only species on the planet that punishes ourselves 1,000 times for one mistake. Because we make a mistake, and then we feel guilty about the mistake, and then we punish ourselves about the mistake, and then we remember the mistake, and then we bring it up again, and we remember that mistake, and we feel guilty about it, and then we punish ourselves, and we get into this vicious cycle of punishing ourselves over and over and over again for the same mistake. And if we're in families, they also help to remind us of those mistakes. And we get to punish ourselves again and again for those mistakes. And we do it to them, right? We get to remind them of all their mistakes. And so then we get to go through that whole cycle in our mind again and again and again. He says, we have to stop abusing ourselves. We have to remember that we came here to be the presence of love and to love ourselves. He says, the greatest sin you can commit is self-rejection. If we reject any part of ourselves, we might not find that part of ourselves to be our favorite part, whatever it is. But we do not get into self-hatred. I mean, I feel so bad for some of these young people coming up who are trying to, like teenagers, and we all went through this, where you're trying to meet someone else's ideal of perfection. You have to be this slim, you have to be, this tall, you have to have this kind of hair. And, how many of us were like ironing our hair or, rolling it on orange juice cans and doing all this stuff to make ourselves beautiful. It's not about that. It's not about that. It's about who are you on the inside, because who you are speaks louder than anything we could ever say. So we come from within. We come from within, and we come from that place of knowing that we came here to be unique beings and to express love and peace and joy and creativity and just bringing new life into being in each generation. Something new wants to be born, and that's why each of us came here, to give our unique gift. And it doesn't have to be a huge gift. It doesn't have to be a gift, I don't have to speak to the United Nations. I have to just speak a word of kindness to one other person. It makes a difference. It makes a difference. Ernest Holmes says, what untold grief might be relieved by words of cheer and forgiveness. By words of cheer and forgiveness. We are powerful. What Ruiz says, Don Miguel Ruiz is the author of the Four Agreements. He's a Toltec shaman, and Toltec is an ancient practice in Latin America, in Mexico. And he says that our word is powerful. This is why we have to be impeccable with it, because our word is our creative power. It's how we communicate, and it's how we think. And so our word is powerful, and we have the power. In the Bible it says to bless and to curse. But he says we have the power to have black magic or white magic. The black magic is when Karen Drucker is in her grammar school class and her teacher says, "Don't sing, just mouth the words." Karen Drucker, who now is a singer for a living, has composed a lot of the songs that we sing. The chant that we just did is Karen Drucker's chant. Because in high school, another teacher said, "You need to be in the choir." She said, "I can't sing." He said, "We'll teach you." She blesses that man every day. So we have the power to bless and to curse. We say something offhand to someone. He gives an example of a mom who comes home and she's really tired. She's had a heck of a day, and her daughter is singing and dancing and jumping around, and she's just got a terrible headache, and the daughter is dancing and singing, and she just says, "Stop singing." And the little girl shuts down and never sings again for the rest of her life because of that one word that was said. Not even meaning to stop that permanently, but just on an offhand way because of a headache, because of what was going on with her. So the second thing that comes up is don't take anything personally. Don't take anything personally, because it's never about us. It's always about that person and where they're at in this moment. And if we can be open in loving compassion and connect with that individual, we might hear what's going on. But don't take anything personally, because he says, when you take everything personally, it's the highest form of selfishness, because you believe that everything is about you. And in some ways it is, because everything, we have an experience, and we get to choose what happens with what we do with that experience. Aldous Huxley said, "Experience is not what happens to a man, it is what a man does with what happens to him." Experience is not what happens, it's what we do with what happens. And so don't take anything personally. I remember being at Asilomar, and I was walking along, and I heard this conversation, and this person said, and I've probably told this story before, but it bears repeating. I heard this guy say, "I'm sorry I pressed your buttons, but I didn't install them." We don't know what's going to trigger someone else's past experience, which they then bring in and insert into what's happening now, and have a higher emotional reaction than we think the situation calls for, because what they're reacting to is not what's happening now, it's that stuff from the past, that emotional thing that happened to them long ago that's still living in the body, that's still living in the awareness, and that gets triggered. The button gets pressed, the reaction happens. And so it's about deactivating, first of all, our own buttons. When we find ourselves getting triggered, something happens and woo, all of a sudden we're like, feeling angry or feeling, totally upset. We don't have to necessarily act on that. We can stop and we can breathe and say, what's that about? What's that about? And usually a little picture will arise in your mind. This is this experience I had, and I've told you this one before too, but I'm going to repeat it again. I was sitting in a board meeting. This was when I first got here, and there was a board member who I just felt myself getting angrier and angrier at this person. And then I thought, what is this about? What is this about? And I really breathed into it, and then I realized that this person was reminding me of my father. And my father had that button in me that we had these knockdown, drag-out fights. And so it just pressed that old dad button, and I was reacting to that. And as soon as I realized that, I could let it go. Oh, that's about my dad. That's not about him. So I could just be calm and listen to what he was saying. And he was saying it very emotionally. I didn't have to get emotional back. What a breakthrough. What an insight. Aha! The third agreement, don't make assumptions. Don't make assumptions. Don't assume that all the police are good and all African Americans are bad, or vice versa. We're all human beings. Every time we make a generalization, you know it's a lie. Every generalization, I'm sorry, is a lie. All African Americans? I'm sorry, there is such a broad range of human beings in that umbrella. We can't say all of anything. All police? We can't say that. They're all unique individuals. They're all doing the best that they can in the situations that they find themselves in. And, police officers are putting themselves in harm's way every day to keep the rest of us safe. It's not a job everybody is going to take up. So we don't make assumptions. Because when we make assumptions, we have expectations. And the Buddha said, watch out for those expectations because they will make you suffer. Because when those expectations aren't met, wee. I remember going to Hawaii with Ping, and I had this whole picture of how it was going to be because I thought his idea of vacation and my idea of vacation were similar. Wrong. I like, laying on the beach, reading a book, going for a swim. He liked to shop. How many aloha shirts can a man have? I found out. The fourth agreement, always do your best. And our best is going to vary from moment to moment. Sometimes we're tired, sometimes we're excited, sometimes we're enthusiastic, sometimes we're bored. Always do your best because the other three agreements rely on that. Maybe we can't be totally impeccable with our word and we realize we've blown it, we forgive ourselves, and we go back and do our best again. We do our best in each moment. We do our best not to make assumptions, to catch ourselves when we're making assumptions, to not take anything personally. We do all of that. Those are some tools we can use to stop abusing ourselves, to love ourselves, to accept ourselves. And when we love and accept ourselves, we have a better chance of loving and accepting everyone else. The other thing I wanted to remind us of are the Sufi gates. Now, the Sufi gates are a way of approaching communication. So I want to tell you a little Sufi story first. There's a Sufi story about a man who was brokenhearted by all the suffering and sorrow he saw in the world. He sat by the roadside and began to beat the earth. He looks up and he yells at God, "Look at this mess. Look at all this pain. Look at all this killing and hatred. God, oh God, why don't you do something?" And God said, "I did do something. I sent you." I did do something. I sent you. So when we see these things, what is ours to do? My sister was talking to a friend of hers, and the friend was complaining because the friend was on the night shift, and they didn't have any green drinks on the night shift. They would make green drinks during the day, but they didn't make them for the night shift. And she's a vegan, and she was very upset that they didn't have green drinks at night. And she would tell my sister, she told my sister this story, and finally at the third time she told it, and the third time she would get very angry and worked up and tell my sister the story. And my sister finally said, "Why don't you tell it to someone who can do something about it? Why don't you tell it to somebody who can do something about it?" So she did. She talked to the manager of the thing and found out, oh yes, they already were green drinks. They were available in the refrigerator. She just didn't know it. We have to do something that is about not just, awfulizing with each other about how awful it is. Awfulizing with each other doesn't do anything except make us all upset and bring us all into hell. Ruiz says the primary form of communication nowadays is gossip. We're all telling stories about people we don't know. Let's stop. Let's figure out, what could I do? Is there a letter I could write to the editor, to my congressman, to my senator? Is there something I can do personally? Or can I just uphold these agreements and also keep the Sufi gates? And the Sufi gates are, before we speak anything, we ask, is it true? And I only know it's true because I have experienced it directly. So when I talk about something that I have heard about, I have to say, I heard on NPR, blah, 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 blah. That's my experience. I heard something on a media outlet, and they said this. I don't know if it's true or not true. I just know that that's what they're saying about what happened. That's the only truth I have. The second thing is, does it need to be said? Will I make this situation better or worse by diving into this conversation? Does it need to be said? In the case of my sister, at the third time she heard that story, she needed to say, tell it to someone who can do something. That was what she needed to say. So does it need to be said? Ask yourself that question. Does this need to be said? And the third thing is, can it be said out of love with kindness? Can I say whatever this is out of love with kindness? Now I have to admit, the person who was listening to my sister didn't take it that she said it with kindness. My sister said she was trying to say it kindly, but the person who heard it got all upset about it, but then decided to do something with it. So you can only do what you can do. You can only do what you can do. And I have to say, before I end this talk, I want to thank Dina Jacoby for the posting that she did on the Center for Spiritual Living. Because she wrote something that came from her heart, and I want to share that with you in case you don't have Facebook or you haven't seen it. She said, all of the violence in this world is only proof that there's a serious absence of love in many lives. As I pray for the lives of the victims and their families, I pray too for the lives of all humans who need to feel loved. Love is the only answer, and that's underlined, and the only thing that will change our world for the better. When love is in my heart and in my mind, I cannot bring harm to another person. It's impossible. In the face of these horrific violent situations, it is up to me and you to show the world that we cannot be broken. I show love and kindness to everyone, especially to those that need it most. Let love lead us through every difficult moment. Be love, feel love, think love, believe in love, give love, walk love, talk love. Peace and love be with us all. Thank you, Dina. So let's remember who we are as we say our affirmation for today together. The affirmation is, I honor the presence of the divine within me. I honor the presence of the divine within me. I honor the presence of the divine within me. I honor the presence of the divine within me. And so it is.